Your introduction is kind of like your resume beginner. It's like your trailer. You know, you have to have like all your snippets and all your takes already taken for the movie, and you just take the highlight reels and like promise something in the introduction, and the introduction is supposed to also lead you in. Hi, my name is Wani, and I'm a philosophy student at La Sorbonne, and today I'll be actually sharing with you my introduction for my paper that I wrote on becoming someone, personal choice in society, does it remain a thing of fiction? So I had my other video on the process. Now I want to focus on the introduction, which I think is the most important part of writing any academic paper. I will start by giving you some advice that I read from this very, very funny thing called like a Vademecum, which is basically a handbook by this person called J.Schmutz from Université de Paris, Sorbonne Paris 4. If you don't know, there's like multiple Sorbonnes. Mine is not Paris 4, but people or students, you know, we move around in different universities, so we share all this information. I found it like so funny, but so interesting and so helpful. So I hope this would be interesting for you as well, to understand how it is that academic papers, or at least French academic papers, are written in terms of its introduction. And the second part of this video, I'm going to share with you my introduction of my paper. And I guess it's also good to say that this paper was written based off of Badiou's L'éthique, ethics, and Bourdieu's La distinction, distinction by Pierre Bourdieu, on the critique, social critique of judgment. So you have your introduction, and then you have 3 parts, and then you have your conclusion. A lot of my friends, they write their 3 parts, and then they write their introduction, and then they write their conclusion. The reason for that is because you need to know everything that you're supposed to say, and your introduction is kind of like your resume beginner. It's like your trailer. You know, you have to have like all your snippets and all your takes already taken for the movie, and you just take the highlight reels and like promise something in the introduction, and the introduction is supposed to also lead you in. But the way that I work, and you know, I don't know if like it reflects like based on your grades or whatever, but you know, your brain works the way your brain works. For me, I cannot write my paper without my introduction first, but this doesn't mean that I don't think about my 3 parts. I will amend my introduction if necessary, but usually the only thing I amend is this thing that like usually happens right before you move on to your 3 parts, which is l'annonce du plan, which is the announcement of your plan. First part's going to be about this, second part's going to be about this, third part's going to be about this. That is probably usually the only thing I change, but my introduction usually is like untouched, but you know, fixed here and there. But what happens is people write their 3 parts, they understand what their 3 parts are supposed to be, and then they integrate it into their introduction. For me, my introduction always has to be about the general problem with all its distinctions, and then my parts speak to it afterwards. But it's never like a resume of my parts, if that makes sense. If it doesn't, you know, write a comment and I will get back to you if and when possible. So let's start with the thing that I wanted to start with, which is this person, Jacob Schmutz, who wrote this very like funny handbook on how to write a memoir, or like, you know, a mini memoir. So it's like mini memoirs are like 8 pages, memoirs are like 50 to 100 pages. The thing that I wanted to highlight was this thing that he showed about this comment made by Thomas Aquinas on Aristotle's De Anima, of the soul. Basically, like there are 3 intentions that comes into writing an introduction. So the first is that you want to make your listener bienveillant, so like make them at your disposition, like generous to your disposition. I had the definition as like basically a generous disposition in regards to humanity, a quality or of a will that aims for your good and your happiness. So it's not someone who just like wants to murder or like, you know, totally like demolish your argument. So this is the first thing you want to do. The second thing that you want to do is to make them docile. So docility is creating this tendency, natural tendency to have that person obey you, or like, you know, to give in. So just being like, you know, you're docile. It's like a cat like showing its belly, you know, like it's just, or a dog just like very comfortably on the ground. You want them to be like that. You have that mental picture of this is what you want your listener to be in. The third thing is you want them to be attentive. So attentive, to have their attention, but it becomes clear at the end. So the thing about bienveillante is that you do that, you make them have a good disposition towards you, a generous disposition towards you, if you show them what is useful, utilité of science. The second is docile. So if you make someone docile when you give them the order of your plan, your division, that you will treat. And then the third is making them attentive by actually witnessing the difficulties of the thing that you're treating. So what this guy wrote, and I'm just like roughly translating, is that the introduction needs to at first make your reader bienveillant by defining very clearly your subject, so with your definitions, and also placing your work by situating it. So it's like, what era, what problem, what conditions are you writing this under? So it's kind of like time period, historicity, and also like generally what issue does this attack your subject? Why is this subject pertinent? So this is so that you can make hungry, like mettre en appétit, like make them hungry or get their interest on your topic with a certain rhetoric. So rhetoric is a technique of discourse. It is a set of rules, and basically it is grammatically legible, precise, and of logical coherence. It's also eloquence, or to speak well. So write well, have good grammar, and also like just communicate clearly and simply. One of the biggest advice from our professors is just like write short sentences. You don't have to be Proust. Try not to be Proust. Just write clear short sentences and say what you want to say. So you do that, and you're also not supposed to parachuter. So basically like have them like go out and then like fall through like all the historiography of the philosophical debate. You need to like slowly introduce them to it. You need to like make them interested and hungry to know, and not just totally disorient them with like how much they do not know. The funny thing he wrote is like, pire dont il ne peut même pas soupçonner l'intérêt. It's like, it is worse when you do this when the reader themselves like aren't even suspicious to their own interests. So it's like you barely got them interested and you are already disorientating them. There's 0% chance that one, they're going to read you, or if they have to read you, that they'll read with interest or generosity. So he also said like, assure yourselves that this last défaut, like a deficiency, is not only for students but also like current philosophers working, because I think it's not a hidden secret that a lot of philosophers and academics, like they just write and write and write and write, and it's only for people within academia and for no one else to actually truly understand, or no one actually thinks about those people who are outside, who are interested but find it extremely opaque, and they are afraid of coming into reading. So the other thing is docility. He says that you will get this if you indicate the path in which your work will be taken according to its plan. So just say the order and make a detail briefly of the parts that you are going to talk about and the sources. So this is when I said to you that like, at the end you have this thing called annonce du plan, which is the announcement of your plan. And also like, I indicated my sources, which is these two people right here. The last thing that you want is to get the attention of your reader. So you do this by showing them the problems and your difficulties. You need to show that you have a position. There's this thing about like this last meeting that I had for my research paper, was that you're supposed to go in and say that where you want to get to, but you're also very much supposed to talk about your difficulties, which is like really like hard, because like, you want to show that you've done a really good work and that you've surmounted a lot of things, but it's also like very interesting to see like how it is that certain things are supposed to help you move forward by admitting your difficulties. And of course, like there's this thing about like, you don't want to show too much about all these difficulties that you've had, or else like you don't want to create doubt essentially with the examiner. That like, oh shoot, yeah, you're right, you totally did not fix that problem. But at the same time, like, if something shows no difficulties, then it's kind of like, what is the interest in your work? Like, where is the tension? And also, like, where is your honesty on how it is that you've approached the subject? Because if it's easy and it's easily said, what is the point of what it is that you're doing? Also, the point about like that you've taken a position, at first I was like wondering like, what does that mean? And the reason for that is like, there's this thing that he said, that a thesis should be at once argumented, which means that it has to be coherent and justified with the quotes that you're reading, and refutable, which is something that introduces this idea of scientificity. I refer to Popper. But the idea about holding a position and having it refutable, it means that you have to take a stance. If you're just like in the middle ground and you don't really say anything, you're not saying anything. But it is a risk, but you have to fight for your position. So the point is to persuade the reader that you have something to say and that there's a reason to be interested in it. Remember that there are 3 things that a thesis should have. One is that it is susceptible to be discuté, so like challenged. It has to be specific, so it has to have a specific problem. And then it has to be concise. So this one I think like specifically for the introduction, but also like, you know, really good philosophy, in my opinion. Well, I don't know, Hegel has like these many books, but I have a very strong appreciation for very small books that are like chili peppers, you know, just extremely powerful. So that is the methodological side of it. I will read my introduction, which I translated into English, and I will put this on my Substack if you're interested. But let me just begin. So, to be someone in society, a personal choice, does it remain something of fiction? So I wrote, this work seeks to reconciliate the formal and practical aspects of what it means to become someone in society, as well as the concrete steps it requires. To be precise, we seek to understand how to escape the destiny of being nothing but a simple statistic, to be just some person. The 2 central themes that frame this approach are that of politicization and subjectivization. The suffix ation plays a pertinent role as it directs to the process and transformation of our object of interrogation instead of its static form. We therefore will not treat politics, the simple relation that the individuals hold with one another in society, nor the subject, one that distinguishes itself from an object by its capacity to act according to their own will. We analyze, however, the lived tension of the subject torn between 2 processes. On the one hand, politicization, that which entails transformative effects and concrete consequences for the individual of multiple relations with others in society, that assigns one their place. And on the other hand, subjectivization, which corresponds to the attempts of the individual to reconstruct their own proper person despite these relations that determine them socially. This social position, as we will show, is classification or ranking only possible after the individual has been divided and subjected to abstraction of their once personal attributes to make them apt for their own categorization amongst others. It is worth highlighting the difference between community and society. The first refers to social, that is, the simple living together, whereas the second, through the management of politics, organizes its components and structures them hierarchically, in hierarchy. The transformation of immatriculization that makes each person at once comparable and interchangeable. So I could have been more precise with immatriculation, which is, you know, when you get your passport, when you get like anything that assigns you a number, even your phone number. That is to transform everyone into an object compatible amongst others within a structure that which carries the consequence of dehumanization. Through daily life, the acquisition of the knowledge of our social value replaces our own sense of self-worth. By this innocuous or trivial multiple processes of politicization under the form of social interactions, our belonging to the system of the social world consolidates and our place becomes fixed. And yet, if this determination was total and fatal, so all of that is just before was me working on definitions and also talking about the state of things, like where it is that this problem finds itself. But now, like, you know, I do this turn, which is something to introduce my problematization, which is the tension of the text. And yet, if this determination was total and fatal, what is it that allows us to perceive this gap between our sense of self and our social identity? Or doesn't the conservatism of society, oriented towards the maintenance of its structure, suppose the existence of deviations on the part of individuals who do not conform to their assigned place? Because if we need to be reminded of our social place, does it not suggest that we often forget it? Said differently, despite all the real continuous pressures at making us give in, the reason why give in is important is because the word céder is something that's constantly repeated in Badiou's ethics, and to accept our social identity, it seems, luckily or perhaps naively, that these pressures are not strictly determinate, and that in this way we maintain the capacity to resist, that is to say, to want more than what we are offered, and to pursue the realization of our so-called unrealistic aspirations. So here I'm already seeing like a French problem, which is usually you have like a specific problematic, which is like one sentence that shows the tension between two ideas. So here, because I think like I focus too much on the harmonizing of these ideas, which I'll get to in my last paragraph, I kind of like have an idea why it is that it wasn't like a spectacular grade. Again, my grade was a good grade, but yeah, it's something, you know, to just do and learn, because I think there's only been one professor that appreciated like the Anglophone way of writing an essay, which is like you do research and you accumulate it. But that is not to say that like, you know, I don't or I didn't have like this specific kind of issue in my paper. But again, what is written, and this is what I have. So to finish off, to more closely examine this oscillation between politicization, the objectivization and objectification of the individual in society, and subjectification, the sovereignty of self, we rely on two works which in appearance seem antagonists but which ends up converging towards the claim for humanity. We retrace the formal metaphysical structure of Badiou's ethics and complete it with the givens of the concrete reality, that is statistics analyzed by Bourdieu in distinction, in order to describe and prescribe what is necessary to become someone of consistence, that is, a subject that resists all attacks on their own person or self. Let us examine this precarious path through the three following questions. 1. What does it mean to be someone? 2. What is necessary to become someone of consistence? And 3. Personal choice in society. Does it remain a fiction? So rereading it now, yeah, I think like what I missed was the problematic about maybe like, you know, I could have focused on how it is that the fictional aspect comes in collision with the concrete aspect of like the lived experience. But the thing is that with my paper in general, what I did was you cannot avoid obviously the concrete aspect, but there is this need for you to maintain a fictional level of self so that you can remain free from your concrete determinations. So maybe the framing would have ended up giving my thing a different direction. But I think like, you know, after all this reading and after all these assumptions that, you know, Bourdieu and Badiou are completely antagonistic, I was really excited to show how it is that I felt that they met at a point, which is this ode to humanization. But yeah, living and learning. I hope you found this helpful, and I'll talk to you soon.